Empire Builder. I've been planning on saving this shirt, actually, not doing a video with it, and I really never wear it until I do like squad leader or something. But I'm probably never going to get around to it. But it's the John Hill Memorial shirt. The year he passed. They did this at Consenwell. Anyway, it was at the top of my pile somehow because everything got sorted in my clothing. So, as to Empire Builder, very, very seldomly, this may be the only case of a game that misaligns with my kind of the kind of play that I like, and that emphasizes a sort of enjoyment of optimization and remembering what you're doing and stuff like that. That I've played so damn many times. I can't think of anything else that fits in that case. And it's not that I absolutely despise the game, nor I have a respect for it, honestly, which is probably an unfair situation. Like, if you look at most of the Euros that I review, when I review a Euro, I'm usually like, well, I hate this because of this. And then I pick on, where it's unrealistic and whatever. But it's kind of hard unless I see some glaring flaw in the game mechanisms or in play. It's kind of hard to really point out things that are of any relevance to most of the people playing them. And in this case, I also can't really find fault with the game for the kind of people who this is the right kind of game. Which isn't to say that I don't get an enjoyment out of it. So I do get a weird sort of enjoyment out of the Crayon Rails games, but that enjoyment is probably the things that people who do play it see as flaws, right? So one of the enjoyable things for me about it is the effect of the luck. The fact that you can fall into a win. You got to do a lot of work, and you got to be in the running and all that stuff. But, somebody could be screwed over on the last turn or on the last couple turns. And in fact, right at the beginning of the game, so much depends upon, the luck of your draw. Now, the reason I say this is probably stuff nobody likes is because things like the public locking rules, the auctions, stuff like that. Here we got the auction game. These were designed to mitigate the amount of luck that comes from the cards and to bring more strategy and more more group valuation to the cards that get turned up. And that's especially important at the very beginning of the game when you're laying out the initial set of your track. I don't know if the auction is just on that first round or if it continues forever. I know the public locking is for the cards throughout the game. None of these interested me because while the little optimization puzzles. And that's what the game is really about, right? You have a little set of cards on the base version. If you start playing the other versions, you expand the scope of it. But you have a little set of 3 cards, and you got to figure out what is the most efficient use of these cards. And you want to turn your cards over. You don't want to be sitting on garbage cards. There's a cost to throwing out all your cards. And likewise, you have to compare the opportunity costs to the track that you're laying. Is the fastest route going to be the best long term? is the cheapest route the best? Things like that. Fastest and cheapest are usually pretty close to each other. You might be off by a movement point or two in general, but and you might shave that off by a couple bucks. But sometimes there's big decisions to make as to what you want your track to look like in the long run that you have to land on. And then there's a lot of these little tiny things where you're trying to maybe mitigate the dangers of the deck or carry goods that might give you an opportunity if the randomness shows up in your favor. And that's really what this game is about. It's about creating these little, solving these little puzzles of optimization in, as they develop again and again and again. Now, that kind of play, I would say, is very appealing to a lot of Eurogamers. The idea that, like, so one of the problems that some Euros suffer from is you come up with a strategy and you can just sort of follow it, right? And maybe other players can screw with it a little bit, usually inadvertently, by taking something that you needed that's a valuable resource to both of you or whatever. But in general, you're not really faced with a whole lot of churn and turmoil in the game. And this game actually provides a lot of that, which, again, that may not be cool to most of the Euro players. But, again, if you play with the modifications that, that kind of gamer has designed, you may come a lot closer to the type of game that you like. It is a long game, though, for that style of play. Yeah, some of the Euros are getting kind of long nowadays, but this is from an era when sitting down to a 4-hour game was not a big deal at all. And that's probably about right. It might go a little longer. It all depends on the players, obviously. If someone, has a hard time assessing the position at various times, it's going to take longer. And it's probably, because of the way the game is structured, it actually depends on the number of players you have. So, like, 2 players can probably get this knocked out in a couple hours. But, it's probably about an hour a player, like Civilization. Yeah. And overall, I think it does a pretty good job of delivering what it's supposed to deliver, in terms of those little puzzles coming out, those little optimizations coming out. I think it's a fine game for that. In terms of historicity, it's kind of crap. But, it was actually, the thing that appealed to me about this was, as opposed to 1830 or Rail Baron, all the tracks on the board, and you can use it, and you just, you buy it in order to pay less money, and to have, to control routes and whatnot. In this, you have to actually build the track that you want. And that was the big, sell for me, was this idea of, I'm linking things up based on, my desires, which are these requests for deliveries or whatever, and just really, have a free hand as to what the track is that I want to lay. Now, 1830 kind of gives you some freedom towards laying your track, but it's a totally different situation, and your track's going to conflict with other players, not just in the sense that it's not your track, first of all. It's everyone's track. It's not, 1830 doesn't follow what the actual rail companies did in the same way that this does, where you're laying your own track and there's a cost for other companies to use it. This doesn't cover much else, though. Commodities are sprinkled around the board as much for gameplay reasons as for, why they're where they are. And destinations, I think even more so. Um, I don't think a hell of a lot of thought was put into, gee, why would this place need this? Whereas that's something that I really wanted from Rail Creep, Railroad Tycoon, which is this idea that like it's industry that's driving the rail network, and the rail network that's driving industry, and that sort of synergy between the two, which really creates something magical. Now, that's a lot harder to do on a game board, and I think what I call the Winsomes. I think some, but it includes things like Steam and Chicago Express, and some of them came out under Winsome names, some of them under others. And is that some of those games explore that kind of concept of like industry being linked to the rail building. Silverton with its mining, sort of. The big one there is Lords of Sierra Madre, which really does it in some detail. Silverton's more moving commodities, but commodities and markets. But yeah, it's that kind of. Oh, there's Bullfrog Goldfield, which handles the mining and rail interactions as well. But I don't remember a hell of a lot about that. Again, that's something I played maybe once or twice. I played it at most twice. I definitely played it once. Maybe 3 times. I may have played it with my wife. But all at one period, it doesn't have the reinforcement that my older games do, where I play them again and again and again over decades, and then, maybe with years in between, but they built up a certain memory to me, and that's never going to happen again. Not just do I not have gaming groups that would bring me to play the same games multiple times the way I did, with the Crayon Rails, but also I just have too many fucking games. There's too much out there, I was the guy who had the most games in our group, and it was around 500, maybe less than that. But a lot of them were war games that didn't get a lot of competitive or opposed play, but just a couple of plays of it sticks in your head, and you kind of remember it, and you can think back. But all these newer ones, for the last 15 years, I guess, that I've been, kind of back in the hobby to some extent or another, and mainly call it the last 12 or so. It's about when I was doing the videos. I have just so many damn things have been flowing into my possession, mainly because I can't prevent myself from buying stuff. And, it's really easy to get mixed up about mechanisms and about, memories about different things. Where the hell am I? I don't know. Let's talk about components. So, it's a puzzle game, right? I mean, it creates these little optimization puzzles, and it has a puzzle board. I insist on the puzzle boards. Why? Because the most fun I have in the game is assembling the damn puzzle board. The board is functional. Sometimes this works in conjunction with the crayon. Sometimes the markings don't come off very well, but as long as you... with the actual crayons, most of the colors work okay in terms of coming off, but you want to make sure you clean it right away. Do not let it sit on your board. I think, I don't remember if it was this or my Eurorails had been left sitting when I bought it, and yeah, I wouldn't buy these new. Yeah, I bought Iron Dragon new, so shut up. And I bought another one, the India one or whatever. But Yeah, with the crayons, you want to make sure you wipe them quickly after play. If they sit too long, it becomes more and more of a bitch. There might be some solvent, even a little water sometimes can help, but you want to be careful because it's a cardboard board. I found cloth works better than paper towels for some reason. Um, Maybe it's just that like I can't stand getting throwing away a paper towel, every time I play the game or whatever. Although knowing me, I could put it aside and use it for something else. I tend to save my paper towels for long periods. But what it can't be used for is cleaning my glasses, which is the primary thing that I would use a paper towel for. My clothing is, my napkin. It comes with an insert, a little plastic box, which allows you to put everything in place. Paper money. You might want to use chips. The cards, which I found too stiff for comfortable shuffling. And then all these little chips. Of course, newer versions of the game may be a little different. It would be great if there was some way the chips could sit in place and not jumble. Anytime you move this game, or if you wanted to store it on its side or something, everything's going to be a mess. This got played a lot with my first wife, so the most common period when I was playing it, it was pretty much just set there and there was no issue and it worked just fine. But in later, whenever I move or whatever, or if I wanted to bring it to game with others, it would be a nightmare to keep those pieces in place. There might be other solutions. Really shouldn't go where I've got it there. Let's pull this out. See if this goes up here. And they're going to fit there. Okay, well, this is going to be problematic. I've got to get this this bookshelf under control. Nothing's sorted where it belongs, and all the games are just sort of in a jumbled order. And I knew that was going to be a problem, and my plan was, well, at some point or another, I reorganize it. Most of the games that were on here didn't used to be in the bookshelf. They used to be in a closet when I was in Phoenix, because I had all my war games on the bookshelves. War games are really easy to organize. And I had the 18xx's and whatnot in them too, but these other games, I have a really hard time organizing them. For one thing, the boxes are all different shapes and sizes. And I also screwed up in terms of how I built the bookshelves up this time. Anyway, overall, I understand why people like Crayon Rails. I think it's a fine game that, does what it intends to do. What it intends to do isn't what I enjoy. What I enjoy about it tends to be more the things that people complain about it, which is why I made a variant that's even worse in their view. But it's not something I would seek out and try to get people to play. It's generally something that I see as a cost of maintaining a gaming relationship with certain people, or because both of my wives were, the first one was really into Crayon Rails. She really liked it. Like, the things we played the most: Talisman, Crayon Rails, and Magic. And these were the things that just like everything else was kind of, every now and then we'll play a game. Basically we would play one of these one of each of these, and then maybe one other game, but not in a cycle because Magic would get played all the time. Crayon Rails more than Talisman because Talisman was a pain in the ass to set up. But so those all get kind of linked in my mind. But then my second wife also enjoyed these, nowhere near to the same level. She just wasn't all that, like, very little of our interaction was about gaming, unfortunately, when that's sort of the focus to my existence. So, you know, most of our interaction was food, shopping, if we went. You know, I mean, she wanted so much alone time and whatnot, and yeah, and just wasn't into the doing a pastime together in the same way that that I kind of expected. To the extent that she was into doing a pastime together, gaming was fine, but we just didn't do that much, except sometimes we would sit in front of, you know, watching South Park while eating or whatever. We usually watch something while eating, you know, every night or whatever. But yeah. So I don't have the same kind of strong links. The only game that I really link with her is Dominion. I played a whole shitload of Dominion with her. But Crayon Rails was on the more positive scale, which is to say that, you know, I guess one of the big advantages to it is it's fairly simple rules, and there's not a hell of a lot you have to look up to relearn. Anyway, not really my kind of game at all, but I think it serves its niche particularly well. Now there are a lot of different games that allow you to do the same kind of optimization in a shorter time frame that are probably more appealing. But one thing I can guarantee you about this that's kind of nice is that the way the cards come out and whatever, whether or not you're playing with one of the more strategic variants, you will be faced with a continuous sequence of these kinds of puzzles that are going to be different each time. They all are similar, but the balancing act is a little different. So, yeah. All right. Cheers.